When single father Jake Miller took his 8-year-old daughter camping, he thought the biggest danger would be mosquitoes. But when they found a terrified girl running through the woods with killers on her trail, the hunters had no idea they were about to face a former Navy SEAL who would do anything to protect children. The morning sun filtered through the tall pine trees as Jake Miller helped his 8-year-old daughter Sophie set up their small tent in the remote camping spot. It had been 6 months since his wife Sarah died in a car accident, and this was their first real adventure together as just the two of them. "Dad, can we explore the woods after lunch?" Sophie asked, her bright blue eyes sparkling with excitement. She had her mother's eyes and her father's adventurous spirit. Jake smiled, pushing away the familiar ache in his chest. "Of course, princess. But we stay together, okay? These woods can be tricky." What Sophie didn't know was that her father had chosen this isolated location for a reason. Jake was a former Navy SEAL who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before retiring to raise his family. The woods felt like home to him, a place where his military training felt natural rather than out of place in civilian life. After lunch, they began their hike along the unmarked trail. Jake pointed out different plants and animal tracks, teaching Sophie the survival skills his father had taught him as a boy. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt like he might actually be able to do this single parenting thing. That's when they heard the scream. It was high-pitched, desperate, and definitely human. Jake's military instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed Sophie's hand and pulled her behind a large oak tree. "Dad, what was that?" Sophie whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Stay here," Jake commanded in his military voice, then softened his tone. "I mean it, Sophie. Don't move from this spot no matter what you hear. Promise me." Sophie nodded, sensing the seriousness in her father's voice. Jake kissed her forehead and disappeared into the underbrush with the silent movement of a trained operator. Moving through the forest like a ghost, Jake followed the sounds of crashing branches and panicked breathing. Within minutes, he spotted a young girl, maybe 16 years old, stumbling through the trees. Her clothes were torn, her face was bloody, and she kept looking back in terror. Behind her, Jake could hear the voices of men calling out to each other. "She went this way. Don't let her get to the main trail. Boss wants her alive, but if she keeps running, we might not have a choice." Jake's blood ran cold. This wasn't a game or some teenagers playing around. This girl was being hunted by grown men who clearly meant her harm. Every protective instinct he had developed as both a father and a soldier screamed at him to act. The girl stumbled and fell just 20 feet from where Jake was hidden. She was exhausted, terrified, and had nowhere left to run. The sound of her pursuers was getting closer. Jake made his decision. Moving silently, he reached the girl just as she was trying to get back to her feet. She spun around, ready to scream, but Jake put a gentle finger to his lips. "I'm here to help," he whispered. "My name is Jake. Are you hurt?" The girl stared at him with wide, desperate eyes. She was Hispanic, with long dark hair and was wearing what looked like the remains of a school uniform. "They're trying to kill me," she whispered back, tears streaming down her face. "Who are they?" Jake asked, already scanning the area for defensive positions. "Bad men. They took me from school 3 days ago. I escaped, but they keep finding me." Jake's jaw tightened. Child traffickers. He'd encountered them during his military service overseas, and they were among the most dangerous and ruthless criminals on Earth. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maria," she whispered. "Okay, Maria. I'm going to get you out of this. But I need you to do exactly what I say when I say it. Can you do that?" Maria nodded, something in Jake's calm confidence giving her the first hope she'd felt in days. The voices were getting closer. Jake quickly assessed their situation. There were at least 3 men, probably armed, and they knew these woods well enough to track a frightened teenager. But they weren't expecting to encounter someone with Jake's training. "This way," Jake whispered, leading Maria toward a cluster of large boulders that would provide cover. As they moved, Jake's mind automatically shifted into tactical mode, identifying escape routes, defensive positions, and potential weapons. They had just reached the rocks when the first man appeared through the trees. He was tall, muscular, with gang tattoos covering his arms and a pistol in his hand. When he saw Maria, his face broke into a cruel smile. "There you are, little bird," he called out. "You've caused us a lot of trouble." 2 more men emerged from different directions, clearly having coordinated to surround the area. One was holding a rifle, the other had a knife. Jake recognized the tactical movement. These weren't just criminals, they were organized and experienced. "Who's your friend?" the man with the rifle asked, noticing Jake for the first time. Jake stepped protectively in front of Maria, his posture casual but his muscles coiled like a spring. Just a hiker who got lost, he said mildly. Maybe you could point me toward the main trail? The men laughed. Wrong place, wrong time, old man, the leader said. Just walk away and forget you saw anything. The girl comes with us. I don't think so, Jake replied, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel that made the men pause. Dad. Everyone turned to see Sophie standing at the edge of the clearing, her face pale with fear. She had disobeyed his order to stay hidden, probably worried when she heard voices. Jake's blood turned to ice. Now both girls were in danger, and his 8-year-old daughter was looking at armed men who trafficked children for a living. Well, the leader said, his smile becoming even more predatory. Looks like we hit the jackpot today. Point 2 for the price of 1. That was the moment Jake's military training fully kicked in. These men had just threatened his daughter. Every rule of engagement, every moral constraint, every consideration for proportional response went out the window. Sophie, Jake said without taking his eyes off the men, close your eyes and count to 50. Don't open them until I tell you. The leader raised his pistol. You're not in a position to give orders, old man. Jake smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Actually, I think I am. What happened next took less than 30 seconds, but it would be replayed in the nightmares of the surviving traffickers for years to come. Jake moved with the fluid precision of a man trained to kill efficiently and silently. The leader's gun was in his hand before the man could react. A quick strike to the throat dropped the man with the rifle. The third man tried to run, but Jake was faster, taking him down with a move that left him unconscious but breathing. When the clearing was silent except for the groaning of the injured men, Jake turned to the girls. Sophie, you can open your eyes now, he said gently. His daughter looked around at the 3 men on the ground, then up at her father. Dad, how did you do that? Jake knelt down between his daughter and Maria, his hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Sometimes, princess, daddies have to protect their children. And sometimes that means using skills you hope you'll never need. Maria stared at Jake with amazement. You're not just a hiker, are you? Jake shook his head. I used to be a soldier. But now I'm just a dad who won't let anyone hurt kids. Over the next hour, Jake used zip ties from his camping gear to secure the 3 men. He called the police on his satellite phone, giving them precise GPS coordinates. While they waited, Maria told them her story. She had been walking home from school in a town 50 miles away when the men grabbed her. They were part of a trafficking ring that sold girls to buyers across the country. She had been kept in a cabin deeper in the woods, but had managed to escape when one of her guards fell asleep. There are other girls, Maria said, tears in her eyes. In the cabin. They're probably so scared. Jake's jaw tightened. Where is this cabin? About 2 miles north. But there are more men there. At least 4 or 5. Sophie, who had been listening quietly, tugged on her father's sleeve. Dad, we have to help them. Jake looked down at his daughter, seeing Sarah's compassion shining in those blue eyes. His 8-year-old had just witnessed violence, but instead of being traumatized, she was thinking about other children who needed help. The police will handle it when they get here, Jake said carefully. But that could be hours, Maria said desperately. And if these men don't check in, the others will know something's wrong. They'll move the girls or worse. Jake was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Every logical part of his mind said to wait for law enforcement. But his heart, and 20 years of military training, told him that those girls might not have hours. Sophie, he said finally, I need you to stay here with Maria and watch these men. If any of them wake up, you yell as loud as you can. The police will be here soon. Where are you going, Dad? Jake checked his sidearm, which he always carried when camping in remote areas. To make sure some other little girls get to go home to their families. Dad, be careful, Sophie said, throwing her arms around his neck. Always am, princess. Jake moved through the forest toward the cabin with the silent precision that had made him one of the most effective operators in his SEAL team. The trafficking cabin was exactly where Maria had said it would be, a rundown structure that looked abandoned from the outside but showed clear signs of recent use. Through a dirty window, Jake could see 2 men playing cards at a table. He could hear voices from another room, including what sounded like crying. His chest tightened with rage at the thought of what those children were going through. Jake had faced terrorists, insurgents, and enemy soldiers, but nothing had ever made him angrier than knowing there were scared children just 50 feet away from him. The takedown of the cabin was swift and efficient. Years of training had taught Jake how to clear buildings silently and effectively. Within 10 minutes, 2 more traffickers were unconscious and zip-tied, and Jake was opening the locked door to a back room. Inside, he found 4 girls between the ages of 12 and 17, all Hispanic, all terrified. They cowered when the door opened, expecting another guard. "It's okay," Jake said gently in Spanish, a language he'd learned during his military service. "I'm here to help. You're safe now." The girls stared at him in disbelief. The oldest, a girl of about 17, spoke up. "Are you police?" "No," Jake said, "I'm just a father who won't let anyone hurt children." "What are your names?" As the girls told him their names and stories, Jake felt his heart breaking. They had all been taken from their families, some as recently as a week ago, others months earlier. They had been told their families didn't want them back, that no one was looking for them. "That's not true," Jake assured them. "Your families are looking for you. The police are looking for you. And now you're going home." By the time the police arrived at the original campsite, Jake had returned with the 4 rescued girls and 2 more unconscious traffickers. The scene looked like something out of an action movie. A mild-mannered single father and his 8-year-old daughter sitting calmly next to 5 rescued trafficking victims and 7 incapacitated criminals. Detective Sarah Martinez, who had been working trafficking cases for 15 years, stared at the scene in amazement. "Sir, did you do all this yourself?" Jake shrugged. "Just couldn't stand by and let children be hurt." "What's your background?" Detective Martinez asked, noting the professional way the criminals had been subdued and secured. "Former military," Jake said simply. Sophie piped up proudly, "My dad was a Navy SEAL. He's the best dad in the whole world." Detective Martinez nodded with understanding. That explained a lot. Over the next few hours, the full scope of the trafficking operation was revealed. The 7 men Jake had captured were part of a network that had been operating for years, moving girls across state lines. The FBI took over the case and within days arrests were being made across 3 states. Maria and the other 4 girls were reunited with their families in emotional scenes that left Jake wiping away tears. The gratitude of the parents was overwhelming, but Jake deflected all praise. Any father would have done the same thing, he insisted. But Sophie knew better. As they packed up their camping gear a few days later, she looked up at her father seriously. "Dad, not every dad could do what you did." Jake knelt down to his daughter's level. "Sophie, what happened out there was scary and I never wanted you to see anything like that. But sometimes good people have to stand up to bad people to protect those who can't protect themselves. Like Mom used to say about being kind to everyone?" Jake smiled, remembering Sarah's endless compassion. "Exactly like that, Princess. Sometimes being kind means being strong too." A month later, Jake received a letter from Maria. She was back in school, seeing a counselor and slowly healing from her trauma. But she wanted Jake to know that his kindness had given her faith that there were still good people in the world. "You didn't just save my life," she wrote. "You saved my hope." The letter also included a drawing from Sophie to Maria, showing 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. At the bottom, in a child's careful handwriting, it said, "Friends forever." Jake hung the drawing on their refrigerator, next to Sophie's school pictures and Sarah's favorite family photo. It served as a daily reminder that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on foreign battlefields, but in quiet moments when you choose to protect the innocent. 6 months later, Jake received a call from Detective Martinez. The trafficking network had been completely dismantled, with over 30 arrests and more than 50 victims recovered. The information gathered from the men Jake had captured had been instrumental in the investigation. "I wanted to thank you again," Detective Martinez said. "Those girls got to go home because you were willing to act." "I just did what any parent would do," Jake replied. "No," Detective Martinez said firmly. "You did what a hero does. There's a difference." That evening, as Jake tucked Sophie into bed, she asked him a question that had been on her mind. "Dad, do you think Mom would be proud of what you did?" Jake thought about Sarah, about her endless capacity for love and her fierce protection of anyone she saw as vulnerable. He thought about the girls who were now safe at home with their families instead of trapped in a nightmare. "I think," Jake said softly, "Mom would say that love sometimes looks like fighting for people who can't fight for themselves." Sophie nodded sagely, satisfied with this answer. "I want to be like that too when I grow up." Jake kissed her forehead. "You already are, Princess. You already are." As he turned off her light, Jake reflected on how much their lives had changed since that day in the woods. The nightmares from his military service had stopped, replaced by dreams of children running free and families reunited. He had found his purpose again, not as a soldier, but as a protector of the innocent. The medal from his military service sat in a drawer, largely forgotten. But on the refrigerator, next to Maria's letter and Sophie's drawing, hung a handwritten thank you note from each of the families whose daughters had come home. Those notes, Jake knew, were worth more than any medal ever could be. Because sometimes being a hero isn't about the battles you fight in foreign lands. Sometimes it's about the moment you decide that no child should ever face evil alone, and that as long as you're breathing, you'll stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. And sometimes, the greatest victory is simply ensuring that a little girl gets to sleep safely in her own bed, knowing that there are still good people in the world willing to fight for her.